Michael J. Whig Tory with the opinion. And what are we discussing today? We're going to discuss the Jordan B. Peterson, not any Jordan Peterson, but Jordan B. Peterson, and Pierre Poilievre. They had an interesting discussion with each other recently. Today is January 4. They had a podcast released January 2 that's had 1.4 million views as at this moment that I'm recording this. So there you go. So I've got my own opinions because I don't think anybody has a clue what they're doing. You say, how can you say that? Well, this is how I can say that. All they're doing is taking what historically created the problem today to begin with, everything in the past, they're going to apply to today. And if you really think that which was used in the past to fix issues is going to fix what's created the problem, you really got to think, man. When are we going to start waking up? And then you're going to say, oh, waking up. Wokeism. I've been led to believe that's bad. Well, if you want to look at wokeism as a situation, that probably was... probably, in all likelihood, was created in the 1960s because of the United States slavery. Let's just do a quick search on that. Let's do a quick search on wokeism. You want to know? You're going to hear the clack of my my keyboard, but listen, nothing's scripted here. Wokeism. What are we going to get for wokeism? Okay, so here we've got woke, which beginning in the 2010s, it came to be used to refer to a broader awareness of social inequalities. So this is something that has been used a few times over in various different things, such as racial injustice, sexism, and denial of LGBTQ rights. Now, definition and meaning as far as the dictionary.com, let's check it out. Oh, usually disparaging promotion of liberal progressive ideology and policy as an expression of sensitivity to systematic injustices and prejudices. Okay. Origin of wokeism. Let's check this out. Oh. No. Okay, what is Collins Dictionary? Let's see what these guys say. Oh, that's recent. Let's go to the Oxford Dictionary. Oh, progressive or left-wing attitudes. Okay. So this is the most recent. But I originally remember wokeism being used, or woke, in, I guess it was the 1960s, civil rights movement. So let's just see what we come up with woke, just to quickly touch upon this. Woke meaning. Z-woke meaning. Okay, so here we go. As I thought, it predates the 60s, back to the 30s. And this is when it originally came into play. Awareness of social and political issues affecting African Americans, often in the construction state, woke. So when we look at the further explanation of woke, it's the past of wake, so it's a different state. So you woke, now you are wake. So you want to stay asleep? Because this is really, if you're going to look at this in a very simplistic term, you go from sleep state to woke state to wake. Very simplistic way of looking at things, but then a sign of genius is how you apply things in their most simplistic form. Yikes. Can that really be true? So here we are, Pierre Poilievre. This is our topic of the day, Pierre Poilievre and Jordan B. Peterson.
So you take the total business investment of the United States divided by the total number of workers in America, it's 28 grand. In Canada, it's 15 grand. The Canadian worker gets about 55 cents for every dollar of his American. And
okay, this sounds good, but this is all made up to make his... This guy, you got to remember, he spent all his time in the caucus with his research team just creating pain points, creating points of interest that have happened to create pain points, and just to touch on those pain points, because he's got a slogan for each one of those pain points.
they're both measured in USD. In Vancouver, more money goes to bureaucrats than goes to the carpenters, electricians, and plumbers who build the place. And to add insult to injury, tradespeople who build homes can't afford to live in them. Why is it that we're still importing oil when we've got the world's third biggest supply? Why is it we can't export our natural gas?
I think that was...
Because our oil is dirty oil. It's not the highly refinable type like Saudi Arabia and the U.S.
perhaps the single stupidest thing I ever heard a politician say. Your federal government spent $6,000 of your family's money going over their budget.
They've squeezed the taxpayer out of every last dime, and they're still $62 billion short.
It's worse than that because I suspect that the true picture is a lot more dismal than we know. Okay, so that...
There we go. More fear-mongering. The true picture might be a lot more dismal than you know. You know, if you look at deficits, look at what's happened in the United States. But the interesting thing about the United States, they can get away with it because their dollar is pegged as the currency of for world trade. And that's a major advantage. Gives them a superior ability to create deficits to help their country that others cannot take advantage of because of the framework of the fiat currency system that's used worldwide, which no longer is suffice or sufficient for what it was initially tended to serve. It needs to be changed. Just going to say that right now.
That's going to be dumped on you sometime in the...
And nobody understands that. Everybody's just looking at all these, get caught up in the noise, and nobody's coming up with a real solution to fix problems. It's called a patchwork orange. That's all it is, patchwork. Didn't work 50 years ago or 70 years ago. Didn't work 10 years ago or 20 years ago. And what makes you think it's going to work now? And I'm going to put this, I'm going to create this impression. If you really think the only thing that the conservatives are going to rely on to get started with is tax breaks, understand that historically tax breaks, and the philosophy was give tax breaks, especially the corporation, trickle-down effect to the people. It's never worked. And to give you an example, Biden's last administration, he was focused on expanding the middle out and lifting up the bottom second. Now, that's close to being ideal. But you'll also notice by working on the middle, not the top, the middle, if he had worked on the bottom, it would have been even better for the people, but we're not going to go there at this point. His agenda was to work in the middle, build that out, and lift up the people below. And phenomenal growth. The growth in the United States of America the past 4 years surpassed any country in the world. It is a benchmark for all others to work for. So back to the video.
In the next year.
They get the party, I get the hangover.
8 years
You
from now.
are a
what does it
hangover,
look
Pierre
like?
Poilievre, and that is my own personal opinion. Great family guy, but all he's done in the comment session is just slag, and vitriol and harm from my point of view. There's nothing that solves a problem. Nothing that creates a platform to solve problems.
Hello, everybody. I had the opportunity and the privilege today to speak with Mr. Pierre Poilievre, who is the leader of Canada's Federal Conservative Party.
Which we greatly appreciate. But nonetheless, I want to make another point before we get into this, and that is that this Peterson has a professional degree, and his accreditation for that professional degree is under the umbrella of the province of Ontario, which is a conservative government by the name of Doug Ford. So that's his issue with the governing body of his professional degree is Ontario. But he is made out like it's because of the federal government, and it's a misnomer. It's a false narrative, and I want to make that clear right now.
But also, barring catastrophe and God willing, Canada's next prime minister, a transition in power in this country is likely to take place sometime between March and October or November of 2025. And it appears very probable that Pierre Poilievre is the heir presumptive and will be the next prime minister of Canada. And so I talked to Mr. Poilievre 2.5 years ago, which was quite shocking to me. I thought it had been more recently than that. And a lot has transpired in the meantime. What did I talk about with Pierre? Well, I think mostly what I did was give Canadians and people on the international side a chance to see who this man is in an hour and a half of discussion, and the extra half an hour on the Daily Wire side. You have enough time to get a sense of how someone responds spontaneously and emotionally and cognitively to complex and challenging questions in a manner that's not rehearsed. That's the huge advantage of the podcast format. We talked about all the stories that Mr. Poilievre has heard in his thousands of event interactions with Canadians in industrial settings, in manufacturing settings, in academic settings, so that he could inform himself about the true situation that's facing Canadians struggling to make ends meet, despite their best efforts now, which is a dismal reality in Canada with its excessive housing prices and diminishing economy. Most importantly, perhaps, what is his vision of the future that both threatens and provides opportunity for Canadians? How is it possible for the citizens of this great country to dig themselves out of the malaise and pit that has been dug for them and by them over the last 9 years?
Okay, so now I've got to disagree with this point here. Doug Ford for them? Yikes. Am I onto something? So you're going to point a finger 9 years to the Trudeau government. Ontario is the engine of the country. And Ontario has a conservative government under the name of a guy by the name of Doug Ford, who came into power in 2018, stripped away rent controls. Developer friends got preferential treatment. And in that period, rental rates more than doubled. Subsequently, house prices went further up. Further up? Is that good grammar? Good grammar? Well said. Nonetheless, what was recently found out was that, or discovered, in the United States, the corporations now that run most of the rental properties in Ontario, so now it's corporations that run the rental properties in Ontario instead of private slumlords. Now it's private corporation slumlords. Interesting twist, on words? Gotta love it. So the software they're using was for price fixing. Then CBC did an interview with one of these guys and talked about financialized landlords. So this is why we've got a problem. There's other issues too, Airbnb, that have helped cause this. Trade of renovating homes to turn over for profit, that's another factor. There's a few other factors at play as well. But people are going to just try to blame the feds. In all reality, it's a provincial problem. Crime is a provincial problem. The housing issue is really a provincial problem. Crime is a provincial problem. So everybody is focusing on all these pain points to try to make it a federal position of issue, which is not. I'll give you an example. Federal government gave $9 billion to Doug Ford at the start of the COVID-19 issue. 2 years later, he was still sitting on over $7 billion. Hadn't used it to help with the pandemic. Just sat on it to shore up his balance sheet. Nothing else. Guy doesn't know how to run a government. Knows how to run a business after his dad gave it to him. Doesn't know how to build the business, but knows how to run it and just use a cudgel to try to keep things in good shape as far as the pro formas and the balance sheets. And this is what you have to understand. Crime. Housing issue. It's really a provincial issue, not a federal issue.
And what could be done to remove
and the homelessness, provincial.
Remove the impediments such that this country could become the dynamic industrial powerhouse that it certainly could easily become. So join us for all that. So, sir, it's been almost 2.5 years since we sat down to talk the time before. So I guess the first thing I'd like to know is, what have you been doing during that time? I'd like to hear about your day-to-day schedule and your week-to-week schedule. Like, lay out your job.
Basically, we have two parts to my professional life. It's very bifurcated. There's the Parliament Hill side, which is early morning meeting with my leadership team, House Leader, Deputy Leader, Whip, etc., to plan out the day, the battle plan for our parliamentary committees, question period, etc. That is punctuated by one weekly caucus meeting and just the daily prosecution of the government, which is the quintessential.
Okay, this is an important factor here. Daily prosecution of the government. So, daily prosecution of the government.
The role of an opposition leader. And then the other part to my life is touring. I asked my assistant today how many events we had done over the last year, and he said it was exactly 600. I mean, a few weeks ago it was 570 something. So we've done 600 events, and those are like tours at mills, mines, factories, farms, high-tech facilities, and we tour in, see how the place operates. Then I give a short speech, do a question and answer, and then I just mull about and shake hands with the workers for 25 minutes to an hour, and then I go on to the next stop and do it all over again. And we did that in 9 provinces and 2 territories this year. And so that's a summary of my workload and work plan to to do my job.
And you said 600 events. You made allusion when we were driving over here that the weekends are particularly packed, that you'll do like 10 events on Saturday or Sunday.
Right.
And so what a typical event, what do you enjoy about the events? Why are they useful? And what do you learn?
Well, first of all, you get a practical insight into how the country actually works. Like who makes the widgets? How do those get made? How does our supply chain come together? What skill sets do these incredible workers have? What background qualified them to be a licensed welder, or to run a CNC machine, or to be the CEO of a 300-person company that supplies parts into the American economy? And that practical insight, I think, is important if you want to lead a government and a national economy. So you learn a lot. Then I get to hear the stories of the people who work in these places and get their feedback on what they want, what their dreams and aspirations are.
Yeah, I want to turn to that in some detail. Let me ask you about the parliamentary side too, because I think it'd be useful for people to know how you prepare for what you do in Parliament. It isn't obvious to me that people exactly understand the business of being in opposition, at a really practical level.
Right.
What do you see as your major function? I know you're there to push back against the government and to question and criticize, but it isn't obvious how you go about preparing for that, or how you decide what issues you're going to focus on, and how you distribute the responsibilities among your caucus and your broader team.
So, there's a lot of discretion. You make up your mind when you wake up in the morning. You read the news, you see.
Okay, that's an important factor right there. A lot of discretion. This is important to understand.
I have a team that gives me a full briefing of all the published news from the mainstream media, all the news from the independent and ethnic media, all a download of the entire social media landscape. And then I respond to that by saying, well, I think these are we have roughly 25 questions we can ask. And I'll say, well, I want 10 on inflation, and 3 on violent crime, and 4 on whatever the subject.
Okay, so this tells me a lot. When you're focusing on pain points of inflation and pain points of violent crime, you're going to use these tools to invoke fear in the population. This is how this gentleman operates, folks. Here is the template. I'm just pointing it out to you. So now he's just focusing on pain points, because he knows if he hits those pain points, it's going to be a tender point in the population. And then he's articulated well his slogans. And that's to give you that warm, fuzzy feeling. And this is how they're manipulating you. Just showing you how you're being manipulated. You give too much credence to what should be, which isn't there. There is no policy. There is no plan. So when you've got no policy, no plan, and that in-between factor that doesn't make any substantiative claims of either the two aforementioned policy and plan, then you've got nothing but conjecture. All you're doing is working on pain points because you know it's going to it's going to trigger a response. You're coming up with slogans because you know that's going to give a warm, fuzzy feeling. And he's very methodical about it. He's telling you his plan. That's how he does it. And you should know that. You don't pick up on it because everybody looks at things differently.
It happens to be in the day. And I want this committee to focus on this today and that committee to focus on that today. And then our teams go out and we do it. And I've been very blessed because my caucus is extremely talented and they don't need a lot of direction. But we've been acting in unison, and I think that's why our message is pumping.
They don't need a lot of direction because he, like Stephen Harper, who he worked under for a long, long time, were masters of control of their caucus. And Harper, from what I remember, also overreached with Stats Canada to subdue the information you get from Stats Canada, which made us unique in the democracies of the world.
Out so clearly to people. It's not a cacophony of sound. It's a clear drumbeat. And that's why people are hearing and appreciating our message.
So yeah, he's telling you right there. It's not a cacophony of different noises. It's a clear drumbeat, hitting your pain points and providing you with slogans to make you feel warm and fuzzy. That's it. That's all that's going on there. And this is what's been going on. Where you have a cacophony of noise is in the House of Commons, where it's just attack, attack, attack. Doesn't provide anything of substance, just attack, attack, attack. This is my observations.
Feel that your party is well organized at the moment.
Extremely well organized.
Okay, so what's your evidence for that?
Well, by every measure, by every statistical measure, we're stronger than any political party has been in, well, maybe in my...
Pretty simple, Jordan. It doesn't even have to be asked because, you know, this guy is leading the popular vote. This is a worldwide issue because even though Biden, which did a remarkable turnaround for the United States, just phenomenal, got kicked to the curb. The guy that created most of the problem, Donald J. Trump, they put him back in after. Organized crime, criminal. Unbelievable.
My lifetime, objectively speaking, memberships, fundraising, poll numbers.
Right, so people are positive in consequence of that. So it's a lot easier to lead an organization when it's successful.
That's
Obviously,
right.
People are much more enthusiastic.
Yes.
Why do you think you're in that position? What's going on that's setting the stage for that? And I don't just mean the failures on the Trudeau side. I mean, what do you think you guys are doing right?
Well, we have a clearer mission statement, and people know exactly why we're in this. You know, whenever someone asks me if they say, I'm thinking of running for parliament or for mayor or some other political position, what's your advice? Well, I said, well, before I get to the advice, I have a very simple question. Why do you want this job? Mm-hmm. And it might seem like a simplistic question, but it's actually the most important question in life. Why? Why are you doing what you're doing? And our answer to that is to bring back the Canadian promise that anyone who works hard gets a great paycheck and a pension.
Okay, so this Canadian promise, I'm going to throw this back for you. You're going to see this come up later. Grandiose utopia. You're going to see how grandiose utopia is going to be used in a different way. And I'm going to say this slogan here is grandiose utopia.
That buys them good food and a nice home and a safe neighborhood. That anyone from anywhere can do anything and that people are in charge of their own.
Grandiose utopia. Why do you think this could be like this? Why do you people buy into this? Grandiose utopia. You think he's going to fix your problems? No, with tax cuts. Tax cuts are not going to cut it. Yikes. Tax cuts are not going to cut it? No. Tax cuts have been used over decades, and decades. All that's done is propped up the corporate terrorists and wiped out the middle class. The middle class that provides a segment of balance for a democracy to actually work has been wiped out. Factually, historically, I'm correct.
Lives. That's effectively what we want.
Started in 1985 to a great degree under the administration of Ronald Reagan, the Gipper.
To deliver. So every day when I'm in Parliament.
So that's a very local vision in a sense, right?
Okay, so here's another point here. I'm going to Key in on this, local vision. So the housing issue, homeless issue, crime issue are all local. Under, say, Ontario, Conservative government. Under Alberta, Conservative government. Do you see a trend here? You just keep doing the same things over and over again. If you really think what created the problem in the past, from 50 years, 60 years ago, or whatever, is going to fix the problem now, you wouldn't be in the problem now if that from 50, 60 years ago actually worked. This problem wouldn't exist now, but it does. This is why a different way of doing things needs to be done.
Doesn't have that the grandiosity of an international utopian vision, for example.
Well, maybe
it's very down to earth.
I think people are sick and tired of grandiosity. In fact, I think there's something.
What are you talking about? You just gave a grandiose utopian narrative, and yet you're saying, you know, what kind of double talk is this? And this is what you people have to understand. You have to pay attention. That's all I'm saying. I'm pointing it out to you. Pay attention to it.
And about a family that can go on a nice road trip and share stories and build lasting memories that the kids will remember when they're 85 years old.
Despite
I think that's
producing all that nasty carbon dioxide.
That's right. I think those things are grand. And I think with the problem we've had in this country and in all of the countries that have been afflicted by this horrendous utopian wokeism.
Hold on. First of all, nasty carbon narrative. If you don't think climate change is an issue, you're kidding yourself. It really is. Climate change is a natural evolution of the planet, but because of its inhabitants, which are human beings, we've abused the privilege of having this wonderful planet that's been by design for us to have whatever we need to live in a good, prosperous way. We've abused that relationship. We've created a toxic environment that has actually increased the climate change in a manner that's not proportionate to its natural evolution. So we've created a toxic environment, and we're not willing to fix what we've created. We're starting to see the effects of it, which have been disastrous effects on human beings, but we keep on choosing to ignore it because of these grandiose utopian ways of living the dream, the picket fence, the kids, the dogs. Meanwhile, that's a grandiose utopian way of looking at things that's acceptable. And then wokeism is a grandiose, utopias thing that is not acceptable. So it's a flip side of a coin that's been used in many different ways to manipulate your way of thinking.
Is that it's been focused on the grandiosity of the leadership of the egotistical personalities on top, and not the things that are grand and great about the common people.
So what about his grandiosity aspirations of a leader? Same ego. It's ego.
And that is another reason why I think we're doing very well. People are saying finally there's someone who's focused on letting me take back control of my own life and create a great future for my family.
No, nobody's done that. All they've done is come up with pain points to make you feel the pain and slogans to make you feel good. Hasn't changed anything, hasn't fixed anything.
And so that is, to answer your question, one of the reasons why we've had such incredible success over the last 2 years.
That's correct.
In the beginning was the Word.
Yikes, the Word.
Christ
There
is
was
master
silence
at using
before the Word.
Power of love.
Okay, so there's a lot of distrust, generally speaking, in relationship to, I would say, establishment organizations and political elites all across the West. A lot of that well-earned. Why should Canadians believe that the vision that you just
Listen to this carefully if I think this point is what I think it's going to be.
laid out is something that you hold personally dear and not merely what would you say, a set of carefully calculated campaign slogans?
Well, I look back at everything I've done for my entire political career to the time I was a teenager. You know, some people even dug up my old university essays, and I've been saying precisely the same thing the entire time. When I was 20, I wrote an essay as Prime Minister I would, and the title was Building Canada on Freedom. And the entire piece was about making the government small and maximizing personal freedom. So that's basically what I'm doing now.
So you have consistency
well, there were
going
things,
for you.
when I launched my leadership race, I literally had the same language in my leadership launch speech that I had put in that essay 22 or 23 years earlier. And when I was part of the Harper government, we basically fought for and did the same thing.
And the Harper government greatly suppressed freedoms. I remember it. I witnessed it.
It's then that I'm proposing to do now. So as much as you can be assured...
and he's telling you he's going to do it now. There you go. Just the same thing going to be regurgitated.
Of anything any political leader says, I've got evidence to back it up.
Okay, so one of the things that's been very distressing to observe, I would say, and I'm going to use the UK as an example. I mean, the UK had 14 straight years of Conservative government.
Yeah.
And, you know, as far as I'm concerned, thank God for that, because it could have been Labour. But having said that, they fell 100% prey to the blandishments of the net zero types and brought forward really
They fell prey to the net zero types. Now, this is a worrisome observation on his part, and they both believe this, and it's a nonsensical argument. It's a false narrative, and I'll tell you why. I'll give you a perfect example why. Look at Ontario, mid-1980s. 407 was built. The 407 was built. A guy by the name of Mike Harris sold the 407 to a private consortium for $3 billion, $3 billion, capital B, to shore up his balance sheet. You know, got to get these balance sheets in order. Meanwhile, over the course of the next decade or two, created $33 billion in profits. What? For a $3 billion investment, it created over $33 billion in profits? So, anybody that tells you this net is zero is a fallacy and does not work, they really don't know what they're talking about. Because the reality is proven otherwise. And it sometimes comes under the banner, I don't think I've coined it, but I've been promoting it, zero-sum economics. So net zero, zero-sum. And you have the example there. And they choose to ignore it and create fear when it was actually a positive because, believe it or not, the private consortium that purchased that from the government of Mike Harris personally gave Mike Harris many gratuities and benefits from that initial changeover much later in the future to the benefit of Mike Harris personally.
Catastrophic energy policy, and
Yeah.
the UK is suffering dreadfully for that, and their immigration policy, I mean, Keir Starmer apologized for it, which was something remarkable to behold, and so did Kemi Badenoch, who now runs the Conservatives in the UK. Now, the reason I'm bringing them up as an example is because
I'm going to take it a different way. Immigration policy of the U.S., which has become a contentious factor recently, gave rise to the recovery of the United States, which substantially outpaces the recovery of any other country as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. But nobody explains that. Nobody looks at that. Nobody can understand that, even though it's there to be understood.
Well, they were a conservative government, and they certainly didn't govern by anything approximating conservative principles. And so how do you
conservative
how do you feel about the probability that if the conservatives in Canada take power, that they'll be enticed into this global utopian delusion that seems to have enveloped so many leaders, kind of regardless of their political stripe? What do you think, if anything, can inoculate you or has inoculated you against that?
I know better.
Holy crap. He knows better? This is scary. And you guys buy into this stuff. You'll pay attention to this. You buy into this stuff. He knows better. He's an authoritative figure. He's the authority above all else. Just like Trump was the chosen one. Give me a break.
I mean, Keir Starmer apologized for it, which was something remarkable to behold, and so did Kemi Badenoch, who now runs the Conservatives in the UK. Now, the reason I'm bringing them up as an example is because, well, they were a conservative government, and they certainly didn't govern by anything approximating conservative principles. And so how do you feel about the probability that if the Conservatives in Canada take power, that they'll be enticed into this global utopian delusion that seems to have enveloped so many leaders, kind of regardless of their political stripe? What do you think, if anything, can inoculate you or has inoculated you against that?
I know better.
So Peterson puts forth a proposition. How are you going to protect yourself from this delusional? He's already considered this being delusional. So pain and suffering is good. A loving, uplifting experience for all people leaves nobody behind. No pain and suffering is no good. And this guy knows better. Now it's going to get more interesting here.
Well, elaborate. What do you mean?
I'm not going to do that. And it will...
Elaborate. What do you mean? I'm not going to do that. And this guy, Jordan Peterson, accepts that. Right away, this doesn't work. Right away, I know now, here we are, 15 minutes and 58 seconds into this, of what is a total of 1 hour, 41 minutes and 15 seconds. The rest of it's just utter nonsense. And this guy has stated why. And you really need to listen carefully here.
So one of the things that's been very distressing to observe, I would say, and I'm going to use the UK as an example. I mean, the UK had 14 straight years of conservative government.
Yeah.
And, you know, as far as I'm concerned, thank God for that, because it could have been Labour. But having said that, they fell 100% prey to the blandishments of the net zero types and brought forward really a catastrophic energy policy. And the UK is suffering dreadfully for that. And their immigration policy, I mean, Keir Starmer apologized for it, which was something remarkable to behold, and so did Kemi Badenoch, who now runs the Conservatives in the UK. Now, the reason I'm bringing them up as an example is because, well, they were a conservative government, and they certainly didn't govern by anything approximating conservative principles. And so how do you feel about the probability that if the Conservatives in Canada take power, that they'll be enticed into this global utopian delusion that seems to have enveloped so many leaders, kind of regardless of their political stripe? What do you think, if anything, can inoculate you or has inoculated you against that?
I know better.
Well, elaborate. What do you mean?
Well,
I'm not
elaborate.
going to do that.
I'm not going to do that.
And it will be hard, because the temptation will be...
I refuse to do that. And this is where it loses me. Now, understand, I'm going to give you a little insight. I had actually done this video already once, and then I found out I forgot to unmute my microphone, so I wasted a whole lot of time. But I'm probably going to go into a different direction with this now because of that, because of different factors from my point of view. Because I just want to shorten this because it's just a waste of time here. Now, one of the things Jordan Peterson will bring up is the fact that Mississippi, the poorest nation in the United States, and Canada has done much worse. But look at GDP per capita 2023. Ontario, 71,659. GDP per capita 2023 in the U.S. was 82,715. Like, not a huge difference, kids. Now, here we go. If you want to do a fair comparative, Canada, the whole of Canada, GDP-wise, is comparable. Yes, comparable to the state of Texas. Now look at what Biden has done. Look at this. Every state, and a lot of them are conservative states, Republican states, look at the phenomenal growth rates. Like, he's done a remarkable job. Absolutely remarkable. And look at Texas, 7.4% GDP growth rate. Like, this is massive. And still, you take 78,000 at 2022. I don't know what the 2023 numbers are. We're not showing. Oh, okay, 2023. Well, that's the annual GDP, but nobody's showing. Why they jumped from 2022 to 2024 is beyond me. But even 86 here for 2024. So you've got Peterson, Poilievre. They're saying there's massive differences. And then he, says the Vancouver and the administration, there are these microeconomic factors that may be at play. I have not researched them, I can't say. But I'm giving you the bigger picture. Texas and the overall GDP of Canada. If you're going to make a comparison, compare Texas to Canada. Just understand what's going on here. Now, another interesting thing here is if we look at Ontario, GDP 2023, 71,659. That's the per capita for 2023. Everybody's going to say, oh, it's terrible. It's absolutely terrible. But meanwhile, let's take a look at, I forgot to bring up Missouri because that was brought up before, which is Missouri. Okay? 2022 was 63. 72 for 2024. This is 2023. So you're just being sold a bad set of goods. You're given a false narrative by Jordan Peterson, Pierre Poilievre, to create and stoke fear in the electorate so that they can get in a position of power and have the reins of government. Do they have solutions? I haven't seen any. It's just been conjecture. No policy. No plan. But not even concepts. No policy, no plan, no concepts. So they're just selling you a bag of goods. It's rehashed bullshit based on pain points and slogans. And you buy into it. 2019's the blue line here. This is from Stats Canada, so you know you're getting a proper representation. Each province. So 2019 was pre-pandemic. The burnt orange line was during the pandemic. The gray is after the pandemic. So we have had, for the most part, except for in a few areas, a slight increase, but not to the extent that could be because our immigration policies created a huge influx of immigration that's going to take a little longer to represent in GDP. But based on immigration, that scared people, which you're just sabotaging yourself by falling for those scare tactics. Because the whole reason why Biden did so well was because of immigration. That's really what's worked. So by closing the borders and building friggin' walls instead of bridges, you're just hurting yourself, and you just don't get it. You really do not get it. So I'm going to make another pivot. And this I just ran into this morning. I was just between takes here, and this has caused me to pivot totally. Beyond America, 3 days ago, this guy is, give him credit. I think he's put together a wonderful presentation here, and I think it pays heed to give him attention. Pay attention to what this guy's saying.
Career politician Pierre Poilievre has mastered the art of politics, and he seems on the verge of accomplishing his lifelong goal of being the Prime Minister of Canada. Every week, his lead in the polls seems to increase. I think he's now up well more than 20 points over incumbent Prime Minister or sitting Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. And he seems to be doing it by repeating the same 14 words over and over again. But he really doesn't like expanding on them and explaining what they mean and what the implications might be to Canadians. Today, we're going to talk about that. We're going to look at his slogans and what they mean and what's behind them and whether they make any sense at all. Let's have a look. Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr. was a legendary American Supreme Court justice through the early 19th century. He made a quote once that said, "Taxes are the price we pay for a civilized society." That's actually engraved in stone above the entranceway to the IRS headquarters in Washington, D.C. And while that may be true, I'm telling you, the price keeps getting higher and higher. Politicians know that. They know people hate taxes, so it is not uncommon to have political campaigns center on a theme of, we're going to cut the taxes, we're going to save you money, you'll be paying less, government is too expensive. And you hear that often. But think back, how often have you seen taxes decrease? Do you think we're paying less taxes now than 10 years ago, or 10 years before that, or 10 years before that? Doesn't matter who's been elected. The cost of government has not gone down, taxes have not decreased, but politicians still keep screaming, I'm going to cut your taxes and make sure you have more money in your pocket. Pierre Poilievre has taken one particular tax, a very misunderstood but very hated tax, Canada's carbon pricing legislation, and made it the cornerstone of his campaign. Axe the tax. He's going to end that tax immediately because it makes driving your car more expensive and heating your home more expensive, and it's hurting Canadians. Sounds great. But not everyone understands it, in fact, is probably more of a giveaway than a tax. It's an idea that's been around for a while, promoted by environmentalists. As a matter of fact, believe it or not, one of the first implementations in Canada was in Alberta in 2003. They implemented the idea. Quebec did something in 2007. The idea has been around for a while. And the theory of it is they're going to put a tax on energy which adds to greenhouse gases, gasoline, heating oil, natural gas, things like that. And they will then rebate that money to people. So what happens is, if you are a person who doesn't use any of those things, you're going to end up getting some money from the government, $300, $400, $500, $600 a year, and it goes in your pocket. Now, if you use a lot of that energy, you're going to be just getting back the money you spent already. So it's not helping you any. I mean, if you're running around in an SUV that uses, $100 of gas a week, well, you're paying an awful lot of carbon tax. And when you get that rebate, it doesn't cover the extra cost you had. But to tell you the truth, that's the point of the tax, is to penalize excessive use of energies and to reward people who minimize it. It's something that we've agreed to through the Paris Accord. It's known throughout the world that it's an environmental issue that's up front and center, and countries are acting on it. One of the problems I have with Poilievre is he's great at pointing out things that are wrong and things that he would like to stop, but he never tells you what he's going to do instead. So what are you going to do, Pierre? Fine, axe the tax. How are you going to address climate change? Tell us, because you just refuse to. You just find it easy and convenient to go rah, rah, rah. It's hurting you, axe the tax. Like all the other issues, you don't give solutions. You just run around screaming about problems. Housing and home prices are a serious problem in Canada. Young people don't think they'll ever be able to afford a home. And if they don't have it, rents, they're going sky high. So they're worried, they're scared, and something has to be done. The problem I have is politicians who exploit that anxiety and fear and situation for their own good when they really don't have an answer. And once again, Pierre Poilievre says, build the homes. Easier said than done. Now, I've got two issues with his stance on home building. First of all, his view is that he is going to decrease the price of houses because they're too high. Fair enough. But 2/3 of Canadians own homes. It's their largest asset. It's their life savings. It's their retirement plan. So if you decrease the cost, the market value of houses, basically you're taking my pension and cutting it by 10, 20, 30%. My life savings. That's not good. Now, there are ways around this and ways to deal with it, but he doesn't want to talk about that. He wants to just ignore it as if it doesn't exist. Meanwhile, you still have to answer the young people who want to be able to buy a home, and it's just unaffordable. The solution that Pierre comes up with is, let's force cities to build homes, force them to eliminate zoning, eliminate bylaws, eliminate housing standards and
Still
safety
doesn't solve the
considerations.
problem.
I don't think that's the solution. I'm not an expert. I'm not trying to be the prime minister and run the country. So I don't know the solution to our housing crisis. What I do know is that Pierre Poilievre is not giving the right answers, and he's just using it as a slogan to get more votes.
That's correct. And there actually are some simple solutions, but you're not hearing it from any leader of any political party whatsoever.
Governments almost universally spend more than they take in. And that's not good. Sooner or later, those funds have to be repaid, and someone's going to have to pay taxes to pay that debt, or money's going to have to be printed to pay that debt, which causes inflation. So government overspending is not a good thing. However, it's a very common thing. Politicians seeking office love to tell us about the waste in government spending, the extravagance, the insanity of the things they waste money on, studies and projects. There's a myth out there somehow that the private enterprise businessmen are so much better at it. Well, I've been in corporate boardrooms throughout North America in the high-tech industry, and let me tell you, the waste of money, the extravagance in the private sector is insane.
That's right.
Look at how many large companies go bankrupt because they overspend. This myth that, business attitude towards government will solve our problems just isn't a reality. If you got government to be more efficient, if you eliminated some of the marginal programs, if you made employees work harder, you'd make a minimal decrease in the overall deficit. It's not going to be the cure-all that campaigning, parading politicians want us to believe.
That's correct.
When people compare governments to individuals and how they handle their debt, that's helpful. That's a helpful analogy, but not really accurate.
That's correct.
There are a number of factors with governments that are different than people. For one thing, governments last a lot longer than a lifetime, normally or hopefully, and they have a lot longer period of time to pay back the debt. The intention to decrease the deficit is a good one, but you can only do it one of two ways. You have to either spend less or collect more, which is tax more. So, Pierre Poilievre is going to fix the budget. Now, he also plans on cutting taxes. So that can only mean that the only way he can make the budget better is by decreasing the amount of money that the government spends. It's poppycock to say we'll be more efficient. No, it can only be done by cutting services and benefits that the government now provides. Poilievre continues to refuse to tell us what he plans to cut. He keeps being asked and he keeps being vague. And that's just not good enough. We can't give him a blank check with a majority government.
Well, in the Jordan Peterson video, he actually refused. And then Peterson doesn't push back.
And then let him go out there and slash Canada Pension Plan or universal health care or who knows what else. We don't know because he won't tell us. And that's just not good enough. One of the most basic and fundamental roles of government is to provide protection to people and their property. That's what lets our society function. It lets us live our lives in a safe manner. And when people feel threatened, they're worried. And it's really easy for politicians to go around saying that the other guys are soft on crime. I'm going to get tough. Crime is a very difficult thing to deal with. Earlier, I'd made a statement, or I quoted a statement, that taxes were the price we pay for civilization. Sometimes I think that crime is the price we pay for freedom. You know, the more restrictive a society is, the easier it is to eliminate crime. The more freedoms you allow people, the more difficult it is to control. And the more human your society is, the more difficult it is to control. So there are some real problems there. On crime and crime prevention, Poilievre has been very specific and put forward a number of proposals. Unfortunately, almost every one of them has been tried numerous times in the United States, in America, and been dismal failures. Minimum mandatories, denying bail to innocent people who are not yet convicted, making it legislatively, not a choice of the judge or not a choice of the circumstances, but legislatively, you will not give bail to people. These go against the very principles of a free society. They've been tried in the States and been highly unsuccessful.
Plus increased cost.
I don't know why they'd work here. America has a higher crime rate and a bigger problem with crime than we do here. So if they've tried these things and they didn't work, I don't think they're going to work here. It should be obvious by now that I disagree with Pierre Poilievre and the Conservative Party of Canada on an awful lot of issues and platforms that they are promoting. Now, I voted in my life more than a few times for politicians that I disagree with because I've looked at the circumstances and it was the best choice at the time. But I will tell you, I will not vote for Pierre Poilievre. Not now, not ever. For one simple reason. Character. Character, integrity, common decency. I don't believe he has that, and he's demonstrated time and again that he doesn't. I'm appalled when any politician appeals to the worst in human beings trying to win an election and gain votes. When they use insults, humiliation, name-calling, campaign ads that try to show ridiculous pictures of people, I find that just disgusting. It's catering to the worst in people. It's the politics of hate. That, to me, disqualifies Poilievre from any role in leadership or respect. I just won't take it. And, you know, his policies could gain me hundreds of thousands of dollars. I wouldn't care. I will not vote for the man because of what he's doing, because I believe in a civil society where we deal with people, argue with people, yell at people. You don't go the way you've gone, because that's just disgusting. Not much more I can say. I think I've made myself pretty clear on that point. Before we talk about conclusions and wrap up this video, I want to talk about my own partisanship or lack thereof, my objectivity, my alignment.
Pulled away
What's
too
going on
quickly.
here? Whenever I do a video like this, I get hit with hate. They just start lining up, telling me that I must be a plant of the Liberal Party, I must be an undercover agent of the NDP, I must be this, I
You work for the CIA or the FBI.
must be that. So let's get this clear, okay? I am not a member of any political party. I'm not even sure who I'm going to vote for in this election. I'm one guy here in my basement making these videos. There's no organization behind me. There's no conspiracy going on here to flood the internet with, false information. I'm telling you who I am and what I think, and that's all there is to it. So here we are. I'm closing off this video. It's December 31st, 2024, just after 11 o'clock, the last hour of the year, and I'm sitting here making a video, closing it, finishing it off. It's obvious we are going to have an election in Canada in 2025. It could come really quickly. It may take as long as October. I don't know. And a lot of Canadians face a dilemma, who to vote for. There's a lot of criticisms of Justin Trudeau. He's been in office a long time. Maybe it is time for a change. A lot of people are not fans of the NDP. They're a little bit too far to the left. If you don't live in Quebec, you don't have the bloc. And quite frankly, I'm not nearly enough of an environmentalist to consider the Green Party. Canadians are in a bit of a dilemma of who to vote for. I don't begrudge anybody who votes for the Progressive Conservative Party. Sorry, the Conservative Party of Canada. That shows my age, by the way. But I don't want people to be caught up in the magic answer. This, Poilievre is going to solve all my problems. He's so much better. He's not so much better. Okay? I think he's worse. You may not. To me, I don't think he cares what I think, by the way. There's a very good chance, almost overwhelming chance, that he's going to be the next prime minister. No matter what I say or do or how I vote, it's just going to come about.
That's correct.
I'm just hoping that he doesn't get a majority. What I think people should do is don't vote for prime minister. Don't think of this as Justin versus Pierre. Think of it in your riding and who the people are who are running on your slate. If you've got a good conservative, vote for him. If you've got a good liberal, vote for him. Try to remove the big picture and just vote local. My hope is that the conservatives who will form the government don't get a majority, because I have real fear about what they will be able to accomplish. And there's a very dark agenda that Pierre Poilievre and his philosophy leads him to. So that's it for my video. I hope you enjoyed it.
Yeah, no, greatly appreciate it. I think it's a valid viewpoint that really you all should take a step back and pay heed to. This guy has made a perfect point. Ideally, from my point of view, I'd like to hold off on any election until one has to be held October 2025, because I think you'll be able to have some time to see how the Trump effect has had on the American population and what's going on there. I think that's an important comparative to be able to witness to help guide you. Because the other factor is with the Liberal government and the backing of the NDP, we've been able to see the Canadian Dental Plan and other plans come into play that actually are good for the people. Canadian Dental, that's a smart thing for the people. And we need more like that. That should be a stepping stone. But if we let that go too soon, we're going to waste another 4 years. And how long is it going to take to be able to get actual programs that benefit the people? And there are other inefficiencies or framework. Let's put it to you very bluntly. The economy, the framework of the economy of the financial system needs to be changed. The framework for housing, like this can all be fixed. It really can be fixed. And the start of fixing it requires collaborative effects or relations. It means building bridges. We see a trend now to build walls which do not benefit anybody and limit trade. And that's the wrong way to go. We can change the financial system to benefit the people. We can start changing the housing situation now to benefit the people. But you have to have the intentions. And before you can have an intention become an action, you have to be cognitively aware of what needs to be done, and you have to have a plan. Damn, you got to have a plan? Yeah, you got to have a plan. So, with Poilievre, like we had with Trump, no policy, no plan, and really no concepts. And the only thing they've got going for them is tax benefits, tax breaks. Tax breaks have created corporate terrorism and wiped out the middle class. What's that done for society over the last 50 years? You really got to wake up, folks. And that you think wokeism's an issue? The label and the narrative that's created wokeism and the way it's used right now is a false narrative to invoke a different kind of fear in you. And it's a simple thing. Do you want pain and suffering? Or do you want to uplift and have a happy society? Without leaving anybody behind. It can be done. You just have to make the decision to do it. As simple as that. So I'm going to leave you with that. Think carefully. Questions, comments, throw in chat. Stay safe. Sending love and peace to everyone. Take care and do what my buddies do if you get stressed out. Take a nap.